Okay, morning. All right, well, let's start here. I want to go back to the Greeks. So we talked about the Egyptians and then the Greeks. I'm going to go over some of these notes here. The years that the Greek culture that we talk about was really in existence, 800 BCE to 146 BCE. All right, so the ancient Greek culture influenced by Egyptian as well as Persian and Assyrian culture. The Greeks lived in independent cities, Athens, Corinth, Sparta, Pergamon, which is in present-day Turkey. There are a lot of ruins of Greek cities in Turkey, also in Italy. They colonized and traded throughout the Mediterranean. The city of Athens was important and the most culturally productive of all of them. And so when we look at the art and architecture of ancient Greece, it is often from ancient Athens. And Athenians would have kept themselves distinct from Spartans, from Corinthians, and the idea of Greece is more of a modern thing. A lot of the terminology and ideas we have are modern. We talk about the Romans, they're not Italians, they're Romans. They're on the Italian peninsula, but the nation of Italy wasn't created until the 19th century. Okay, in furniture, well, we know the Greeks more for their architecture than for their furniture. Unlike the Egyptians, we do not have actual furniture pieces. That needs to be rewritten. Typo. We do not have actual furniture pieces from the Greeks, but we do have paintings on pottery and relief stone carvings that serve as models for modern recreations of Greek furniture, most commonly the Klismos chair. The Greeks had all the furniture types that the Egyptians had: chairs, stools, beds, couches, with the exception of the headrest, that unique and somewhat odd artifact. I think we talked about this, that I got more information about it. The Egyptian headrest was meant to sit on the side of the head, so you slept on your side, and it was meant to support your head. I don't quite get it, but that is the understanding of how they used that headrest. Much of Greek art and culture mimicked that of the Egyptians until the Greek Classical Age in the 5th century BCE. Before the Classical Age was known as the Archaic period, and even before that was known as the Geometric period. Don't worry about the Geometric period. That's really, really early culture, just coming out of the Stone Age, really. But the Archaic period is where you start to see this imitation of Egyptian. And then the Classical Age, they just blow past the Egyptians and come up with some unique architecture, art, literature. If you want to read a really, something that seems very, very modern in terms of its idea and how screwed up human behavior is, read Oedipus Rex. That is a Greek. It goes back to this period of the ancient Greeks. Couches used for eating while reclining are also associated with Persian influence. If any of you have seen the ridiculous and fun movie 300, which is about the Spartans defending the pass at Thermopylae against the Persian invasion, which is really more about, it's as much about abdominal muscles than anything else. But that Persians were very much a part of this world. Okay. Architecture. Parthenon, that great temple dedicated to Athena, one of the Greek gods, is the most known example of Greek architecture of the Classical Age. Greek temple design was imitated and expanded upon by the Romans. The low angle to the roof, triangular pediment, sometimes called the tympanum, and columns of the facade, and unique ornamentation have been imitated into the 20th century. We will talk about multiple rounds of neoclassicism, or the sort of nostalgic recreation of the architecture of the Greeks and the Romans. Sometimes the Egyptians, but mostly it's the Greeks and the Romans. The Greeks used trabeated construction, the post and lintel, so post and then a horizontal element with a lintel, rectangular, as opposed to the arch, which uses the circle. They organized their architecture according to principles of geometry. There are harmonic principles of geometry, like the golden section. We're not going to go into it because it's, it's not with this course this quick and brief. I have to edit that. But there is mathematical organization to Greek architecture. The columns were made in sections or drums and joined in the center with a polloi, polloi is the plural, bronze dowel. And then below here, there's an illustration I went out and found for what it looks like. That little figure B that sits, there's a little rectangle of bronze, and then the pin, it all sits in there, and it keeps the column stable. It keeps the sections from separating. Materials, and I included this. There's an article in the archaeology wiki that I put into the readings, the reading section in Blackboard. So you can go and look at that if you want to know more about that. It was interesting. It's from this article about quality control of bronze. That there were people that there was an understanding that the bronze had to be of a certain quality, otherwise you shouldn't use it. Materials: marble and limestone. And of the marble, Pentelic marble and Parian marble are the two types. Parian marble is more beautiful. It's a little translucent, from the island of Paros. And so that, so the two different types of marble. But marble, most important that you know that it's marble or limestone. Architectural orders, the most easily recognizable. They are most easily recognizable by the design of the column capitals. The three orders of Greek architecture are Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. Ionia is the part of what is now Western Turkey. That was that's Ionia. That was like a Greek region. The Dorians were in Western Greece, and Corinthians are north of the Athenians. So those all come from regions of the Greek world, of the Aegean Sea. Ornament. The Greeks shared some ornament with the Egyptians, but much of what is commonly associated with them is unique. You will find many in slide presentations and in the vocabulary list of terms with definitions, but here's a list of some of the more common. Acanthus leaf, anthemion, bead and reel, egg and dart, guilloche, meander, key or fret, palmette, rinceau, scroll or volute. The rinceau is something that was, I think it's really more known as being Roman, but the Greeks used it, and it's kind of like a pretty common, like taking this sort of like scroll of vine in a symbolic way, using that as ornament. Okay, pottery. Greek pottery was very important as an art form, as a practical means of holding liquids or other produce. Olive oil or olives were both a commodity that the Greeks traded. They traded with other cities. They traded with other cultures. The Greek pottery is found all around the Mediterranean, and so in some cases it's found in tombs of nobility from other cultures. So you don't need to know the different types of vessels. There are several different types. If you look at the profile of them, you would be able to learn the difference between a crater and a calyx. But what I really want you to know is to know that the pottery has survived where furniture has not. And that provides an example of Greek technology, decorative arts, and commerce. So it tells us, the fact that the pottery was all over that region tells us something about what the Greeks were doing and what other people were doing. Olive oil was a very valuable commodity. And so you'll still, if you go to Greece today, you still see groves of olive trees where people grow olives and harvest the olives. They create olive oil. Probably the best olive oil, I believe, still comes from the Peloponnesus, which is where the city of Sparta is. There's still there's a modern Sparta, but it's not. If you go there looking for, shirtless warriors, you probably aren't going to find any. Maybe. Okay. Yeah. So the sophistication of the pottery does tell us something about their technological capabilities. Athenian and Corinthian pottery were the most common. In sculpture, the figurative sculpture, and this is, I should specify, this is figurative sculpture, the human figure, becomes increasingly realistic, beginning with copies of Egyptian models during the Greek Archaic period, and eventually reaching a degree of realism in representing the human figure that has set the standard ever since. Greek technology in casting bronze was advanced for the age, and their understanding of geometry and physics led to figurative sculpture that could stand without needing exterior support. Should be a T in there. And you can tell, sometimes I think you could often tell the difference between a Roman copy of a Greek original, because the Romans were not as good they weren't as good at the at figurative sculpture. They were good at building huge buildings, but they're you'll see there's a post or something usually as a part of the sculpture holding it up, so they didn't have to whatever, right? You don't want to it's too hard to make the thing stand up. Some idiot's going to come and knock it down anyway, so just make it more stable. All right, that's a summary of Greek. Yeah. And these are, by the way, these are lecture notes from me. Hopefully you have your own lecture notes, and this will not exactly match everything in the presentation. Question, Elise?
What?
Did you mean to have your mic on?
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It just said, the notice says that told me that you were speaking. So
I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It's no disruption. Okay. Good. Okay, so on to the Romans. I'll read to you what I have put together so far here, and I will finish this up. If I need to give you a little extra time for this first quiz, I will. I apologize. I'm really trying to get this done, but I got knocked off course. All right, so the Romans, the Italian peninsula in Europe, that's Rome, the city of Rome, that's the same place. And there were other civilizations on the Italian peninsula. A little earlier, there's a group called the Etruscans. That some people, they used to think that the Etruscans were like the Romans sort of grew out of the Etruscans, but it's not. But it seems to be that that's not the case. That the Etruscans were, which is up Tuscany, northwestern Italian peninsula. That's where the Etruscans were, and the Romans were farther south in the middle of the peninsula. And Rome just grew to be this dominant there's really a dominant civilization, and it started just out from the city of Rome. The Romans took over the Mediterranean. 268 BCE to 31 BCE. That is when the Roman Republic was. I guess those are the years of the Roman Republic, and it became an empire with with an emperor around in 31 BCE, and that went all the way to 641 of the Common Era, and it was a pretty long decline in Rome. Rome was once they became an empire, they it's well, the things you have to do to maintain an empire make you a lot of enemies. So, and so like eventually, Rome gets destroyed, overwhelmed by Goths and burned, and they have to split. There's more. I'll talk about that more later. So the Romans copied much of Greek culture and art, and there are a lot of even stories, like some Greek literature that like the Aeneid is a epic poem that really is a ripoff of the Odyssey, which is a Greek epic poem. And the Romans copied Greek temple design and put their own flourishes on it. And the Romans, in their innovations, come in engineering and urban planning. Roman architecture, they introduced the arch, the vault, and the dome. And I'll talk more about this when I show you the presentation. And they added that to Greek building types. But the arch, the vault, and the dome allowed them to create much larger interior space. With using the arch, they created aqueducts that would transport water like drinking water, fresh water from the hills outside of Rome all the way into Rome. So they had a fresh water source that would support a growing population. So they were really, their achievements in engineering are significant. They were very good at fighting wars. They introduced innovations to military tactics, and they were able to dominate the people, other cultures around them, and they became large and wealthy. At some point, they became too big and unsustainable. So architectural orders and column types. The Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian are borrowed from the Greeks. The Tuscan is a simpler column, similar to the Doric, and a little bit dressier, but looks a little bit like it comes off. It's like a riff on the Tuscan or on the Doric. And the composite is really, it looks if you compared it to a Corinthian column, you'd see the differences, but it's like a Corinthian column with bigger scroll motif. They also introduced a pedestal to the base of columns or to the base of a temple. So they raised them up. The pedestal might have just been on the column, might have just been to make it stronger. Okay, and as I mentioned, arch, vault, and dome, those are architectural innovations. The materials, they used marble, they used limestone, and they invented concrete. It is a mixture of stone, sand, lime, and water, and then poured into a wooden mold. And the Roman concrete is very, very durable, and one of the reasons for that, probably a very important reason, is that they used salt water, and that using salt water makes concrete stronger. Forms a different type of, a stronger molecular bond. All right, and then I'm down to decorative techniques. Mosaic and fresco. Fresco is a wall wall painting technique where you apply paint onto wet plaster. So you make a painting onto a freshly plastered wall, and if you're doing layers of plaster, on that last layer, when it's wet, before as it is drying, which can take some time, a drawing is, they have different ways of getting like an image, like a tracing of a drawing onto a wall, and then making a painting. You have to go quickly with fresco because once it's dry, that's just the outer surface of the wall. And if you wanted to make a correction, not really the same. And then mosaic, you'll see some examples of mosaic where it is using small pieces of either like stone or glass to create an image on a flat surface. I believe I did mention this briefly last week when talking about the Greeks, because the Greeks also used mosaic, but the Romans, I think they did a little bit more with it. Okay. Any questions? No. Okay,
No.
good.
Mm.
Is there?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. No. So the Romans, so here's an image of what Rome probably looked like back in the 2nd century. Pretty big. It's a large city. You can see some of the like a couple of the well-known buildings. Like you can see the Colosseum, that big circular building, and the Hippodrome, where the horse races, chariot races. If you've ever seen any movies about like action movies about Rome, the Hippodrome is where they had these brutal like chariot races where you could, I guess they would like attack each other on their chariots. But entertainment, the Colosseum was used for entertainment also. Gladiator battles. Sometimes the Colosseum was made with this, like it had a water supply, and they could flood the bottom of the Colosseum so they could stage naval battles in the Colosseum. So it's their football stadium. All right. Now here's an example of Here's an example of a temple, Roman temple. It's actually in present-day France. And you can see it's very tiny compared to some of the Greek temples we looked at. But you see the same basic idea. Here's I guess this is a comparison with the fragments of the Parthenon. The Greek temples had steps that led up all the way around, and in this one, the steps only allow access from the front. The inner wall of the Greek temple was set in away from the colonnade. The columns in the Greek temple go all the way around. In this case, the Roman temple, they have a wall with some of the columns embedded in the wall. So it's really just a different layout. It's a different, it's a different. They made some design changes to it, but basically it's the same. That's very similar architecture with the triangular pediment, that triangle on the front, at the roof. The entablature, which is really like everything above the columns, has all of this, basically the same, like different sections, and in some of it there's ornament. All right, here, arch. barrel vault, and groin vault. So an arch, you can see, is just the top is basically it's an opening, vertical on the sides, and it's semicircular top. This is as a structural, I guess from the standpoint of structure, this is it's strong. It's a very strong opening because it distributes the weight away from the opening. Force goes downward and then outward when you use an arch. You can see the keystone. The way it's built is it can be built up on like a form and built up, and the keystone is the last piece that's set in. And so this allowed for larger structures to be built because it distributes the weight away from these stress points. A barrel vault, you can see, looks like a really long arch. It's a very deep arch, and that a barrel vault can be built quite large, and as you'll see in some of the examples I have to show you. And a groin vault is where you have two barrel vaults meet at a right angle. That allows a large, like a interior space to be opened up to create a more expansive interior. So now here's an example of a structural arch that's still in use that was built by the Romans, Fabricius Bridge. Here is an artist's reconstruction of what the baths of Diocletian would have looked like. Diocletian was a Roman emperor at that time. This is a groin vaulted ceiling. You can see just how much decoration there is. There's fresco. That's fresco and mosaic. A lot of fresco. A lot of that is painted on in fresco. Can you imagine painting like the ceiling in fresco? While the plaster's wet, you're up there on a scaffold on your back painting. That's what Michelangelo did when he painted the Sistine ceiling in the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. Okay, so this is just an illustration of how they applied the groin vault. This is old Pennsylvania Station, which is unfortunately destroyed, from New York City, built in the early 20th century. This is an example of Beaux-Arts style of neoclassicism. This term, Beaux-Arts, is French for fine arts. And this school of the French school of fine arts in the 19th century especially was very dominant in promoting that the neoclassicism was a proper way to express things artistically. And so in the late 19th, early 20th century, Beaux-Arts style of architecture was very popular for building these massive, heroic public buildings. So government buildings, public spaces like Pennsylvania Station. Union Station in Chicago is like that. There are some buildings in Chicago that are also that also do this. They have the same type of neoclassicism. So kind of a cool space. Some of these spaces can be rather beautiful to be in. Okay, now next, the Pantheon. The Pantheon, this is like a temple to all the gods. You can see the facade, this Greek, what looks like a Greek facade, this temple facade, and then out back, it's got this cylindrical structure and then a dome. So this was built almost two. Yes, it was like this is like almost 2,000 years old. So the Romans were. I mean, they did some impressive things. This is another shot of the Pantheon. This is the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., the memorial to Thomas Jefferson. And while not identical, you can kind of see the similarity, right? I can. When the United States government was formed back in the late 18th century, the Greeks and the Romans were a model, this idealistic model for government, for architecture, for ideas of democracy and representative government. The Greeks and the Romans, they got it started, but it was, it was not democracy as we think of it now. It was, well, I guess at the end of the American Revolution, the kind of democracy was similar to Greek and Roman democracy in that it was limited to certain privileged people, white, who owned a certain amount of property. That was if you were not a white man without, or if you didn't have own a certain amount of property as a white man, you did not have the same rights as other people. So all of that has slowly changed, and right now we're still fighting over some of these things. But they really respected the Romans. The Romans were their model. This is Jefferson's home in Monticello in Charlottesville, Virginia, outside of Charlottesville. And you can see it's a little mini version, little mini, I guess, nod to the Pantheon. Here's an interior shot of the Pantheon. And that circular opening is called the oculus. It lets light in. And you can see just how large of a space this is. The Pantheon, here's my note here. It is 142 feet tall inside and 142 feet wide. So it's big. The dome is made of concrete. And so that would have been a huge project to pour concrete onto a structural mold underneath it. Hi, come here. Elliot wants to come up. He wants something to eat. Well, he's going to have to wait. Okay. So pouring concrete to create a structure such as a dome is not a new idea. It's been around for a while. The Romans were quite clever. Now here's some vocabulary for the different types of, I guess, associated with Roman domestic architecture. A villa, a large house arranged around a courtyard. Domus, a Roman house for the upper class, and a cubiculum is a small room in a Roman house. Now here's a reconstruction, an artist's reproduction of what a Roman house might have looked like. One moment. Come here. I don't know what's wrong. Oh, stop it. Okay. So it's very colorful, isn't it? It's really, archaeologists can figure out a lot from the remains left at a building's site, even if there's nothing but residue left. Now, there are other reasons we know about Roman architecture, and I will get into that very soon. Okay, now here's a ground plan of a house from the city of Pompeii, which is not south of Rome. And so you can see the different, this is has some storefront, like commercial storefront, entrance, atrium, bedrooms. Oops. And this is a garden, like it's a peristyle garden out here. There. Now, this is a vestibule into the atrium of a Roman domus at Pompeii with extensive floor mosaic design. And mosaic, a fragmented image produced by fixing small pieces of stone, glass, or tile surface to a surface such as the floor or wall. Now, Pompeii. Does anyone know about Pompeii? Can anyone tell us something about Pompeii?
There was a big eruption.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
There was a big volcanic eruption.
Yes, exactly. It's an ancient Roman city that was buried in an eruption of Mount Vesuvius. I still haven't seen that. There's a disaster movie that came out a few years ago about it, which I keep meaning to see because I'm sure the CGI could be pretty cool. But do you know anything else about Pompeii? Okay.
That's all I've heard of, like
What's
about
that?
the eruption.
You say that again?
Oh, that's the eruption is all I've heard from Pompeii.
Okay. Well, what it did is one city, Herculaneum, which was nearby, got the lava flow, which made it a lot harder to excavate. But Pompeii got this quick inundation with light ash and volcanic stone, which of course killed everybody there really quickly. But it was easy to excavate, and it did preserve everything pretty much as it was. And so, excavations of Pompeii have been going on for the last more than 200 years. And it gives us a really clear idea. It's a unique thing. It's similar to the Egyptian furniture found in tombs in Egypt. It gives us a really clear idea of what it looked like in the ancient Roman world. So this is a real Roman house at Pompeii. Not in tremendous condition, but let's see you after you've been buried by ash for almost 2,000 years. This is called the House of the Silver Wedding. The names of these houses are associated with what's found there, and so they don't know who lived there necessarily. Sometimes there are records of who the owner was. A lot of the people died very quickly, and so a lot of people were found in Pompeii, clutching gold coins, holding the hands of their children, trying to escape, and then dying on the spot. And so they know something about some of the people who lived here. Now this is the peristyle garden in one of these houses. Peristyle garden is just it has this section with a roof supported by columns, which is a portico. but the garden that is enclosed by that portico is a peristyle garden. And you can see this like very colorful fresco painting on the walls. Some of it decorative, some of it more ornamental, in terms of like maybe a little bit more geometric or with patterns. Others with figurative painting. But really, just remarkable to see the kind of we can get a pretty good idea of what this looks like. Some of this looks like a modern edition right there. Here's some floor mosaic with the guilloche. Out on the outside of this circle, you can see the sort of braided ornament, this border ornament. That is guilloche. And yeah, pretty cool design. Here's some mosaic in one of a house that is in this the city of Herculaneum, which was wiped out in the same eruption of Mount Vesuvius. There's this little alcove that's actually three-dimensional and shows some depth. But if you look at the mosaic, there is this illusion of depth in the mosaic. There is some attempt at perspective to show depth. It's not perfect. It's not like we will see later with the Italians, like the Florentines in what is often called the Renaissance many centuries later. But they do have this, with the mosaic, they're creating the illusion of depth and light and shadow. So there is a sophisticated understanding of how to create realism. Here, another room from from a Roman house. And you see the fresco on the wall to the left looks like it's imitating three dimensions, but it is flat. There's a technique of illusionistic technique of painting called trompe-l'oeil. It is TROMPL'Oeil, I think is the correct pronunciation off the top of my head. It's a French term that means to fool the eye. And so this illusionistic realism is meant to look like it opens up into a new room or out into the exterior, and it can be some complete fantasy of an interior. But it is not. That is just a solid wall. Isn't this cool?
That's pretty cool.
Yes, very cool.
Yeah. And you think about how long ago, this is going, somewhere around 2,000 years ago. So they were a sophisticated, they had a sophisticated understanding of not just architecture, but also this idea of illusion and sort of creating, like using this illusion in painting to create the appearance of bigger space, and even space that, something that even if you had windows there, it doesn't, something that doesn't exist out there. Pure fantasy. This is later from from the beginning of the modern era, this hall of perspective. And you can see you can see a lot of this, especially the wall on the left with the 4 columns that opens to an exterior. That's just a solid wall. That painting that's fake. And you can see even on the right side, you can see if you stand with perspective illusions in wall paintings, if you don't stand in the right spot, you can see how it doesn't work. But it doesn't really it won't match the perspective. With this room, if you stand in just the right spot, the tile on the floor, on the real, like inside, will match up with the tile, the illusion of the tile in the painting. So it was this like trick, that was like in that era, after the Middle Ages, where they lost so much knowledge of the Romans, when they started to get it back and then some, they were really there was this exuberance in the Renaissance to show off what was known, all these things that they were learning. Okay, here's another fresco. Now you can see that this is not quite the same sophistication as that. There was an improvement in the understanding of how linear perspective works, which is a method that the Romans really did not appear to have. You can see places here where some roofs that are above eye level, for some reason you can see the top of the roof, which really doesn't make any sense visually. But still cool. Like you get this realistic sense of depth and very specific details of architecture. A lot of red. Okay, so here again, the fresco is a technique of painting done in watercolor or water-based paint directly onto wet plaster. Stucco is plaster used for coating wall surfaces or molding. Stucco was soft and could be carved, and so relief designs would be carved into stucco. Plaster was something that the Romans made a lot of use of. You can see in this arch, you can see some of the guilloche ornament with inside these little like medallions, little tiny relief sculptures. Once the Romans got going, they just really seemed like they just didn't want to quit. They loved their ornament. And just like the details of the beading, like little tiny beads. They picked up they used a lot of Greek ornament, and then they just sort of added their own. This is a lectus, which is a Roman couch, and these are like turning. With wood, turning is when you use a lathe, and a lathe pinches wood on either end. So like a rectangular block of wood, you pinch it in there, and either with hand driven or with a motor, it spins the wood really, really fast. So it's sort of mounted in the center on each side, and then it goes. And then you can turn it into a cylinder by running a chisel or some metal tool against the turning piece of wood, and it'll take all the corners off of it. This is cast. I believe this is cast metal that's meant to look like it has turned legs. You can see also there's this Roman couch, and again, a couch doesn't have a back. A sofa has a back. And then there's this little footstool that slides underneath. It's a set.
But is it a reproduction, or is that an actual piece from that era?
I believe this is an actual piece. I believe this was an actual piece that was recovered from Pompeii. The cushions are not original.
Okay.
Okay. Sella Carillus. You remember the Egyptians with the stools that have the crossed legs that are associated with the Egyptian royalty. The Romans had this similar kind of thing, this X-frame folding chair. It was portable, and so it was often used by Roman magistrates when they traveled, and it became a symbol of magisterial authority because it's like you go around, you have a chair that your assistant or servant carries, and when you want to sit down, your guy brings out a chair and sets it out for you, and you sit in it. Other people don't have that. And there are examples of gravestones of Roman magistrates where this Sella Carillus is carved into the gravestone. So it was known to be, considered a symbol of the person, the office, and the authority. Now this is late. Yeah, this is also. There we go. This is late, really, like way at the end, when you have other, like the barbarians, or as they called them. This is Throne of Dagobert, who was a like very early French culture, which had been what would I guess they had been like not as advanced as the Romans, the Celts, the Gauls, what were called the Germans. They picked up a lot from the Romans, and so they kind of like made their own version of Roman things. All right, and here, this is a later. This is called the Herculaneum chair in a like neoclassical period in Europe. That it borrows elements from classical furniture and creates an updated version of it. But this sort of crossing, this this design with the sort of like crossed frame, it's meaningful. Here, a bronze table from Pompeii. This was recovered from Pompeii. This like animal leg with terminal paw, and sphinxes, and this ornament. You can see this is like this Rousseau ornament in it. And this is from a stone carving that shows what looks like a wicker chair. And that, I think that's also something, one of the ways that we have an understanding of what ancient cultures did, what ancient cultures made, and what their, in this case, what the furniture looked like is from something more durable like stone. So wicker Roman furniture would not have survived. And so it may not have been that common, but there it is. Sometimes they did make like tables out of metal, like bronze table, or they would make stone tables, pretty heavy, but still it was a durable material that you could make furniture out of. Any questions about all of that?
No.
Yeah. Does it seem pretty clear to you?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Now, yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure some of you have had some introduction to the Romans. Some of you may know quite a lot about the Romans. This is hopefully I want to make sure the information is clear. One of the things I want to make sure that we do is you can tell the difference between Greek and Roman, for example. Sometimes the Greek and Roman can be hard to differentiate from, especially when it's used in revival styles, like neoclassicism in the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries. All right. That is the Roman presentation. I'm going to take a short break and then come back, and I would like to talk about the quiz and do a drawing demonstration for the vocabulary part. Okay?
Okay.
So, like,